The video conference had been a trap from the opening pleasantry. Julian Cole knew this the moment Victor Chen's face filled his laptop screen, all practiced sympathy and barely concealed glee. His rival's voice dripped with counterfeit concern as the rain hammered against the penthouse windows, each gust of wind rattling the glass like a warning. "Just checking on you, old friend," Victor was saying, his smile a knife wrapped in silk. "I heard you've been having a difficult evening. These rumors can be so, Mr. Julian, the late-night tea is served. And the non-disclosure agreement for the Tokyo project has been signed." The voice came from somewhere to his left. Low. Calm. So utterly composed that it cut through Victor's monologue like a blade through fog. Julian's hand froze on the keyboard. His gaze was still locked on the screen, but something in the room had shifted. The air had changed. The weight of the moment had redistributed itself. And then he felt it, her fingers at his collar. Light. Precise. Intimate in a way that made his breath catch in his throat. She was adjusting his shirt, her movements unhurried, as if she'd done it 1,000 times. Her fingertips brushed the skin of his neck, and the contact sent a shock of awareness through him so acute that his pulse stuttered. But he didn't flinch. Couldn't. Because Victor was still watching, still waiting for a crack in the facade, and Julian Cole had spent his entire career learning never to show weakness. "Excellent," he heard himself say, and his voice came out steady. Controlled. The voice of a man who had everything under control. "Send the documents to legal. I'll review them in the morning." The woman, Lumi, his brain supplied, though he'd only learned her name minutes ago, stepped back from the camera's range, disappearing into the shadows of the penthouse. But the ghost of her touch lingered on his collar, on his skin, on the hollow of his throat where her fingers had grazed him. Victor's smile had frozen into something brittle. "Tokyo project? I wasn't aware you had an international portfolio in the works, Julian. Competitors don't share their playbooks, Victor." Julian leaned back, forcing his shoulders to relax, forcing his face into an expression of lazy confidence. "You should know that better than anyone." The call ended 2 minutes later. Victor, clearly rattled, had made some excuse about another meeting and signed off with barely a goodbye. The screen went dark. Julian sat in the sudden silence, his heart hammering. The rain continued its assault against the floor-to-ceiling windows, lashing Manhattan in sheets of water and wind. The city below was a smear of blurred lights, distant and untouchable. She was still here. He could feel her presence in the room, a quiet gravity that pulled at the edges of his awareness. He turned. She was standing by the sideboard, pouring tea into a porcelain cup. Steam rose in a slow curl, carrying the scent of bergamot and something else, honey, or maybe vanilla. Her movements were deliberate. Practiced. She wore the hotel's standard uniform, a tailored black dress with a crisp white collar, but on her, it looked like something different. Something deliberate. "Here," she said, carrying the cup to him. "Drink this." He took it automatically, his fingers brushing hers. Warmth seeped into his palm. "I know who you are," he said quietly. "The senior private manager for this floor." "But that's not what I'm asking." She met his gaze, her dark eyes unreadable. "What are you asking, Mr. Cole? How did you know about the Tokyo project?" "There is no Tokyo project. I made it up on the spot." Something flickered in her expression, not quite a smile, but close. "I didn't know. I made a calculated guess. You needed a plausible excuse to deflect his questions, and I gave you one." "And if it had backfired?" "It wouldn't have." She said it with such simple certainty that he almost believed her. Victor Chin is a bully, not a strategist. He came here to rattle you, not to fact-check your portfolio. Give a bully a reason to doubt himself, and he'll retreat every time. Julian stared at her. He'd been in boardrooms with billionaires. He'd negotiated deals that made Wall Street tremble. But no one had ever read him, so quickly and so accurately. "Who sent you?" he asked. "Chen? One of my partners? A journalist?" She laughed, a soft, unexpected sound that made something in his chest tighten. "I sent myself. I've been watching you for months, Mr. Cole. You stay in this suite 3 times a month. You never sleep more than 4 hours. You order Earl Grey at midnight, but you never drink it. You pace the same path until your eyes are bloodshot, and then you collapse in the chair because you're too tired to walk to the bedroom." She tilted her head. "I wanted to know what you were running from." His fingers tightened on the teacup. "That's none of your business." "No," she agreed. "It's not. But your problem tonight isn't what you're running from. It's what you're about to lose." He set the tea down untouched. "I know about the security leak. My assistant told me. I know someone on my team has been feeding information to Chen. That's not the half of it." She crossed to the window, her silhouette backlit by the city's glow. "There's a junior associate named Mark. Gambling debts. Chen's people have been paying them off in exchange for access. He's the reason the press knew you'd be here tonight. He's the reason they're waiting outside right now." "How do you know this?" "I know the head of security for this hotel. We talk. He's been suspicious of Mark for weeks, but he didn't have proof." She turned to face him. "I have proof. A paper trail. Call records, payment transfers, text messages. Enough to destroy Chen's credibility and clear your name." Julian's mind raced, calculating angles. "You've been holding on to this information? Why didn't you give it to me when I arrived?" "Because you weren't ready to listen." Her voice was gentle, but there was steel beneath it. "You arrived here like a man already defeated. You needed to see that you still had choices before I gave you the tools to use them." He was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he sat down on the edge of the couch. "You've been planning this." "I've been waiting," she corrected. "There's a difference. I don't plan outcomes, Mr. Cole. I create conditions where people can choose their own." He looked at her, really looked. The way she stood, balanced and still. The way her eyes held his without flinching. The way she'd appeared in his suite like a ghost and changed everything without asking for permission. "What do you want?" he asked. "Everyone wants something." She was quiet for a moment. Then she crossed to the armchair near the window and sat down, folding her hands in her lap. "I want you to tell me the truth. Not about the leak or the investigation. About why you come here 3 times a month and never sleep. About why you always order tea you don't drink. About what you're looking for in those files you scroll through until your eyes are bloodshot." He felt something inside him shift, a crack in a wall he'd spent years building. "You don't get to ask that. Not after knowing me for 2 hours." "I'm not asking because I have a right to know," she said. "I'm asking because I think you've been alone in this for a very long time. And I think tonight, you don't have to be." The rain thundered against the glass. The city hummed its distant, endless song. And Julian Cole, the man who had never lost a deal, the man who had built an empire on ice and calculation, felt something inside him begin to thaw. 2. The weight of silence. They sat in the quiet for a long moment. The penthouse suite was vast, designed for the kind of luxury that made people feel important. But right now, it felt smaller than it had any right to. Intimate. Vulnerable. Julian picked up the teacup again, more to have something to do with his hands than because he wanted to drink. My mother was a clockmaker. Lumi didn't respond. She just watched him, her eyes patient, giving him space to continue or stop. She had a shop in Vermont. Real clockmaking, not restoration, but the actual craft of building timepieces from scratch. People came from all over New England to bring her their broken heirlooms. She could take apart a grandfather clock with her eyes closed and put it back together in an afternoon. He paused, waiting for the familiar ache in his chest. It didn't come. She died when I was 17. I'm sorry. Lumi's voice was soft. That's a young age to lose someone. She worked until the last month. The cancer had spread everywhere, but she wouldn't stop. She said time was the only thing that made sense to her. He laughed, a hollow sound. I never understood that. Time always felt like the enemy to me. Something I was running out of. Something I was racing against. What changed? He looked up, meeting her gaze. Tonight, maybe. Or maybe just now. Sitting here with a stranger who made me tea and saved my career for no reason I can understand. There's always a reason, Lumi said. You just haven't found it yet. He set the teacup down. Tell me yours. She was quiet for a moment, and he saw something flicker across her face, a shadow, quickly suppressed. A long time ago, I was a woman who lost everything. My family, my name, my future. I had to start over from nothing, in a city where no one knew me. I was terrified, and I was angry, and I had no one to blame but myself. What happened? She met his eyes. I trusted the wrong person. Put my faith in someone who didn't deserve it. I let myself be defined by what other people thought I should be, and when it all fell apart, there was no one left to catch me. Her voice remained steady, but her fingers tightened on the armrest. I spent 3 years trying to rebuild. It was slow work. Lonely work. And then one night, in a hotel room not unlike this one, a stranger walked in and gave me a choice. Julian leaned forward. What kind of choice? To stop running from what happened and start building something new. They didn't save me, that's not how it works. But they showed me that saving myself was possible. That I had the strength to do it, if I chose to. She looked at him, and there was something raw in her expression, something that made his chest ache. That's what I see in you, Julian. A man who has the strength to rebuild, but who hasn't yet chosen to. The sound of his name on her lips was different from the way she'd said it before, softer, more personal. It landed somewhere in his chest and stayed there. Those sketches, he said slowly. The ones in my office. How did you know about them? I didn't. She smiled, and it was the first time he'd seen her smile without calculation. You mentioned them just now. My mother's drawings, you said, when you talked about your work. I didn't know before. I guessed, based on what you told me about your past. He blinked. I didn't realize I'd said that. You're exhausted. You're running on adrenaline and fear. You're not watching your words the way you normally do. She tilted her head. That's not a weakness, Julian. It's a gift. It means you're letting yourself be real with someone for the first time in a long time. Before he could respond, a sharp knock sounded at the door. They both froze. Lumi's eyes flicked to the security monitor on the sideboard, a feet of the hallway outside the suite. A man in a dark suit stood there, badge visible, phone in hand. Hotel security, Lumi murmured. They wouldn't come here without reason. Julian stood, his muscles tensing. Maybe they found the mole. Maybe, or maybe Victor Chen decided to escalate. She was already moving, her hand finding his arm, her touch firm and grounding. Let me handle this. You can't, I can. She met his eyes, and there was no doubt in her gaze. Trust me. He didn't know why he did. He didn't know why he stepped back, letting her move toward the door, why he trusted this woman he'd known for 2 hours more than he trusted most people he'd worked with for years. But he did. She opened the door just wide enough to block the security officer's view of the room. Her voice was calm, professional, the voice of someone who dealt with crises every day. Mr. Cole is in the middle of a private conference call with legal counsel, she said. Is there an issue I can assist with? The officer looked past her, trying to see into the room. We received a report of an unauthorized visitor on this floor. A woman matching your description. Some of the guests have raised concerns. Julian's blood went cold. Victor. He'd found a way to get to her. But Lumi's expression didn't change. She stepped into the hallway, pulling the door half closed behind her, and lowered her voice to something intimate. There is no unauthorized visitor. I'm the senior private manager for this floor. If there's been a complaint, I'll check the logs and get back to you. But right now, Mr. Cole is in a critical meeting, and I won't have him interrupted. There was something in her voice, a steel that had been hidden beneath the warmth, that made the officer step back. I understand, ma'am. But if there's any other, there won't be. She smiled, and it was the smile of someone who had one. I'll look into it myself. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. She closed the door and turned to face Julian, her expression shifting instantly back to the calm, focused woman he was beginning to know. They're looking for an excuse to enter the suite. If Chin gets someone in here to plant evidence, you're finished. Julian ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. We need to get ahead of this. I need to call my lawyer. You need to sleep. She crossed to him, her voice gentle but firm. You've been running on empty for 2 days. You can't fight this if you're half dead. I can't sleep. Not now. Then sit down. Close your eyes. Let yourself breathe. She guided him back to the couch, her hands warm on his shoulders. I'll watch the door. I'll wake you if anything changes. You don't have to, I know. She knelt in front of him, her eyes meeting his. I'm choosing to. Something in his chest cracked. The careful walls he'd built around himself, the barriers he'd raised against trust and vulnerability, began to crumble in the face of her steady, unwavering presence. Just for a few minutes, he said. That's all I need. She nodded. I'll be right here. He leaned back, letting his eyes close. The rain was a constant murmur against the glass, a white noise that should have made him anxious but somehow didn't. He could hear her breathing, slow and even, and he felt himself begin to slip toward sleep. Her hand touched his, just briefly, a brush of fingers that said more than words ever could. He slept. 3. The edge of morning he woke to silence. The rain had stopped. The penthouse was bathed in the pale light of early dawn, the kind of light that made the city look like it had been washed clean. And Lumi was still there. She sat in the armchair near the window, her legs crossed, a tablet balanced on her knee. She was scrolling through something, her face illuminated by the screen's glow. She'd let her hair down at some point, it fell in soft waves around her shoulders, and the sight of it made something in his chest tighten. How long was I out? He asked, his voice rough with sleep. She looked up, and her smile was different than it had been before. warmer. Almost private. A few hours. The longest you've slept in weeks, according to your assistant. He sat up, rubbing his eyes. You talked to my assistant? When you were out, I took the liberty of sending your team a series of very carefully worded emails. The leak has been sealed. The evidence against Chen is being compiled by a firm that specializes in corporate sabotage. And your board has been informed that a full investigation will be conducted first thing this morning. Julian blinked. How did you? I have friends in places you wouldn't expect. She set the tablet aside. The point is, you have a window. A few hours before your board meets, before Chen can release his next attack. If you're ready to use it. He stood, his muscles protesting after the hours of stillness. He'd fallen asleep in his clothes, his tie loose around his neck, his shirt creased and wrinkled. He must have looked a wreck. But Lumi was looking at him like she saw something else entirely. I don't know how to thank you, he said. Then don't. She rose, crossing to him. Thanking me is a transaction. This isn't one. He reached out before he could stop himself. His fingers brushed her arm, light, tentative, and she didn't pull away. What is it, then? He asked. If it's not a transaction, what is it? She was quiet for a moment. Then she stepped closer, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes. It's a choice, Julian. The same choice that was offered to me, all those years ago. Someone saw me when I was broken, and they chose to stay. They didn't fix me. They just stayed. And that was enough. Lumi. He didn't know what he was going to say. He didn't know anything anymore, except that he couldn't let her leave. Not tonight. Not ever. She reached up, her hand cupping his jaw. Her touch was impossibly gentle, impossibly warm. He closed his eyes, leaning into her palm, and felt something inside him shatter and rebuild itself in the same breath. Tonight, I'm staying, she said. Because I think you need to know that someone can see you, all of you, and still choose to be here. He opened his eyes. She was so close. Close enough that he could see the pulse in her throat, the faint flush on her cheeks. What if I don't know how to let myself be seen? He asked. Then let me show you. She leaned in, and he met her halfway. Her lips brushed against his, soft and tentative, and the world fell away. The rain, the city, the endless parade of crises and deadlines, all of it dissolved into nothing. There was only Lumi. There was only the taste of her, the scent of her, the impossible rightness of her in his arms. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. Her cheeks were flushed. Her lips were swollen. She looked at him like he was something precious. We have to move, she said, but her voice was unsteady. Before they come for you. I know. He pressed his forehead to hers. But I'm not letting you out of my sight until this is over. She smiled, and it was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Then let's go save your empire. 4. The strategy they worked through the morning side by side, hunched over laptops and papers spread across the suite's dining table. Outside, the city woke to the smell of rain and the promise of a new day. Julian had never worked like this before. He was used to solitude, to the weight of decisions resting solely on his shoulders. But Lumi was different. She asked questions that made him think differently. She pointed out angles he'd missed. She was neither subordinate nor equal, she was something else, something he didn't have a word for. Is this your first time taking down a corporate rival? He asked, half joking. It's not my first time taking down anyone, she replied, not looking up from her screen. Bullies, liars, manipulators, they all have the same playbook. They rely on people being too afraid to fight back. And what happens when someone does fight back? She looked up, and her smile was sharp and satisfied. They run. Every single time. By noon, they'd assembled a file so comprehensive that Julian's legal team called him in disbelief. The paper trail was complete. The evidence was irrefutable. Mark the security leak, Victor Chen's paid informant, the trail of emails and wire transfers that linked them together. You'll have to testify, Lumi said. You'll have to stand in front of your board and explain how you uncovered the plot. I know. He looked at her. And I'll tell them that I had help. That there was someone who believed in me when no one else did. She shook her head. You can't tell them about me. If Chen finds out I was involved, he won't. Julian's voice was firm. I'll protect you, Lumi. Whatever it takes. Something flickered in her eyes, surprise, maybe, or the beginning of trust. You barely know me. I know enough. He reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. I know that you walked into my suite last night and changed everything. I know that you didn't have to stay, and you stayed anyway. I know that you're the first person in years who made me feel like I wasn't alone. She was silent for a moment. Then, slowly, she squeezed his hand back. I know that you're the first person in years who made me feel like I could be myself, she said. Without pretending. Without hiding. They sat in the quiet, their hands intertwined, and the rest of the world faded away. 5. The victory 2 weeks later, Julian Cole stood in his office overlooking Manhattan, a glass of scotch in his hand, and watched the news unfold on his laptop screen. Victor Chen indicted. Corporate espionage ring uncovered. Cole Capital vindicated. The headlines blazed across every financial site. His phone buzzed with congratulatory messages. His team was planning a celebration. But all Julian could think about was her. She hadn't been to see him since that night. She'd been careful, they'd both agreed it was safer that way. But he'd thought about her every single day. He'd thought about the way she'd touched his collar, the way she'd looked at him in the pale light of dawn, the way her voice had softened when she said his name. He reached for his phone and typed a message. I need to see you. Tonight. Please. The response came a minute later. I know. I've been waiting for you to ask. He was at the Corinthian within an hour. She was waiting for him in the lobby, wearing the same uniform she'd worn that first night. But something was different about her now, the way she held herself, maybe, or the way her eyes lit up when she saw him. He crossed to her without hesitation, and in full view of the front desk, the security team, and a handful of guests, he took her hand. I love you, he said, the words escaping before he could stop them. I know it's too soon. I know we've only known each other for a month. But I've loved you since the moment you walked into that suite and saw through every wall I'd ever built. She went still. For the first time since he'd met her, her composure flickered. Her lips parted, and he saw something in her eyes he hadn't seen before, not control, not certainty. Wonder. Julian. I know I'm not easy, he continued, words tumbling out now. I know I'm guarded and difficult and I don't let people in. But with you, I don't have to pretend. With you, I'm just, she pressed her fingers to his lips, silencing him. Don't. He froze. And then she smiled, and it wasn't the calm, knowing smile she'd worn that first night. It was unsteady. Like she was letting him see something she didn't show anyone. I've been keeping secrets for so long, she said. I forgot what it felt like to hear someone tell the truth. Lumi, I love you too, Julian. Her voice broke on the words, just a little. Just enough. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair, and for the first time in as long as he could remember, he let himself be held. Tonight, he said against her ear. Come with me to the ballroom. The celebration. I don't want to do it alone. She pulled back, meeting his eyes. Are you sure? Everyone will be there. The press, the board, your competitors. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. She laughed, a real laugh, the kind that came from somewhere deep inside. Then I suppose I should wish you good luck. Luck? For what? Your secrets, Julian. I'm going to steal every single one of them. He pulled her closer, not caring who was watching. You've already stolen the only one that matters, he said, his voice rough with emotion. You've stolen my heart. And I don't want it back. 6. The ballroom was a sea of champagne and congratulations. Julian stood at the center of it all, a glass in his hand, a smile on his face, and a secret in his heart that no one else would ever know. He'd done it. He'd actually done it. The victory was sweet, but it wasn't the victory that mattered. She was here. He'd spotted her the moment she walked in, a simple black gown that made her look like she'd stepped out of a dream. Her hair was swept up, exposing the elegant line of her neck. She was laughing at something the person next to her had said, and the sound of it made his heart ache. He made his way through the crowd, ignoring the congratulations that came from every direction. The guests parted for him like a wave, sensing that something important was about to happen. Lumi. He stopped in front of her, his voice low enough for only her to hear. You came. Did you doubt I would? Her eyes sparkled. Every minute. He reached for her hand, lifting it to his lips. The gesture was old-fashioned, deliberate, and it drew the attention of everyone in the room. Julian, she said, her voice a gentle warning. Everyone is watching. Let them watch. He pulled her closer. I want them to see. The music shifted, a waltz, slow and romantic, and he held out his hand. Dance with me, he said. Dance with me until the sun comes up. I can dance until the sun comes up, she said, stepping into his arms. But Julian? It's already dark outside. Then let's dance until it's not. She laughed, soft and delighted, and he swept her onto the dance floor. The other guests faded into a blur of color and sound, leaving only the two of them. I've been thinking about you every day, he murmured. Every single hour. You're the first thing I see when I close my eyes. I've been thinking about you too. Her fingers tightened on his shoulder. And about the clock repair shop in Brooklyn. You still owe me that tour. Tonight, he promised. I'll take you there tonight. I'll show you everything. She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. Everything? Everything. My mother's sketches. The clocks. The parts of myself I've never shown anyone. His voice dropped. Because with you, I don't have to hide. She reached up, touching his cheek with a tenderness that made his breath catch. Then take me there, Julian. Take me to the place where you keep your heart. The music swelled around them, and he pulled her close, and the world outside the ballroom ceased to exist. There was only this moment. This woman. This improbable, impossible love. And Julian Cole, who had spent his whole life building walls, finally let himself tear them down. 7. The aftermath. The shop was small, tucked between a laundromat and a bakery on a quiet Brooklyn street. The sign above the door was faded, barely readable, Cole timepieces, since 1982. Julian fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking slightly. Lumi stood beside him, her coat collar turned up against the chill, a small smile on her face. "You're nervous," she said. "I've never brought anyone here before." He got the door open and ushered her inside. "Not once. In all the years I've been coming here, it's always been just me." She stepped into the shop, and her breath caught. The space was small, crammed with clocks of every size and description. Grandfather clocks lined the walls. Mantel clocks crowded the shelves. Pocket watches lay in velvet-lined boxes, their faces gleaming in the dim light. And at the center of it all, on a worn wooden workbench, sat a half-finished clock that Julian had been building for the past 6 months. "This is incredible," Lumi breathed. "You made these?" "The repairs, yes. The restoration. This one," he gestured to the unfinished clock. "This one is the first one I'm building from scratch. It's for my mother." She turned to him, her eyes soft. "You're building a clock for your mother. I never got to finish the one she was working on when she died. She had all these notes, all these plans. I've been trying to recreate it for years." He laughed, a self-deprecating sound. "It's ridiculous, I know. She's gone. She'll never see it. But it makes me feel closer to her, somehow." Lumi crossed to the workbench, her fingers brushing the unfinished wood. "It's not ridiculous, Julian. It's beautiful. It's the most beautiful thing you've ever shown me." He came up behind her, his hands finding her shoulders. "I love you," he said. "I know I've said it already, but I need you to understand. I love you in a way I didn't think I was capable of. You made me believe in second chances." She turned in his arms, her eyes shining. "I love you too, Julian. And I'm not going anywhere." He kissed her then, slow and deep, and the ticking of 100 clocks surrounded them like a heartbeat. "Forever?" he asked, his forehead against hers. "Forever," she promised. 8. The rain came again that night, soft and gentle against the windows of the shop. They sat on the floor amid the clocks, a bottle of wine between them, talking about everything and nothing. "My mother used to say that time was forgiving," Julian said, his voice low. "She said that if you let it, time could heal anything. I never believed her. Not until now." Lumi leaned against his shoulder, her head resting against his chest. "What changed?" "Meeting you." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "You showed me that time doesn't have to be the enemy. It can be a friend. It can give you second chances, if you're brave enough to take them." She looked up at him, her eyes soft in the dim light. "What do you want, Julian? Now that you've won everything you were fighting for?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "This," he said. "I want this. I want you." She went very still. "I know it's fast," he continued. "I know we haven't known each other for that long. But I also know that I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I want to spend the rest of my life showing you how grateful I am that you walked into that suite and chose to stay." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, with a single diamond that caught the light. "Lumi," he said, "will you marry me?" She stared at the ring, then at him. Her eyes were shimmering. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, of course I will." He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. Of course it did. Because everything about them, was exactly the way it was supposed to be. She laughed, and it was the most beautiful sound he'd ever heard. I can't believe you did this. In a clock shop. With the rain outside and 100 ticking clocks around us. It's where I keep my heart, he said. It's where I keep everything that matters. And you matter more than anything I've ever known. She kissed him, and the rain kept falling, and the clocks kept ticking, and the world kept spinning. But for Julian and Lumi, everything stopped. This was their moment. Their secret. And it was just the beginning.
Subscribe to me for more content.